What is a Bitcoin? Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
What is up, Bitcoiners? I want to tell you guys about this awesome conversation I just had with Chris Gimmer. Chris is the co-founder of Snappa, which is a really cool application that enables someone who is not Photoshop or design centric to be able to create all of the design materials that a startup trying to operate on the internet needs. There are a lot of players in this space, and Snappa is emerging as a really cool one. What makes Snappa even more interesting is that they are using BTC as their reserve asset, and it has enabled them to weather the COVID-19 and the 2020 and 2021 kind of economic downturn extremely well, and has enabled Snappa to thrive. Chris has also created an amazing Bitcoin dashboard called Bitbo.io. So Bitbo just has everything that you need to know about Bitcoin. It has all the little different parameters, all the fundamentals, all of the derivatives, the price, the hash rate. It's all in one place. You even have an awesome news feed there that pumps out a bunch of great content from Bitcoin Magazine. So I highly recommend checking out Bitbo.io. But that is enough of me. You guys, I think you're going to like this interview a lot. We get into who Chris is what is happening around the world, and why Bitcoin is so important for the future of humanity. You guys are going to love this one. Let's just get right into the episode. Bitcoiners, welcome back to the Bitcoin Magazine podcast. I'm sitting across from an amazing Bitcoiner and entrepreneur, Christopher Gimmer from Snappa and Bitbo.io. Chris, welcome to the podcast, man.
Thanks for having me.
So Chris, I guess first time on the podcast, I know that you've been a big Bitcoin Magazine fan. I'm a huge fan of what you're doing both at Snappa and at Bitbo. Why don't you give the audience just a quick little intro to who is Chris? How did you get into this Bitcoin game?
It's a long story. I'll try to keep it short, but essentially started off, my background's actually in kind of finance and accounting. But then after doing that for a couple of years and doing some traveling, I realized that I wanted a bit more freedom in my life, and started getting into like podcasts and reading a lot about entrepreneurship and things like, the 4-hour work week and this whole concept of like being able to work online and operating a business from anywhere was super appealing to me. And so I ended up meeting Mark, who's now my business partner on a lot of projects that we've done together. And then we just started working on, a bunch of ideas. Some of them were failures, some of them were, reasonably successful. And then eventually we hit on Snappa, which is our software as a service product, which is essentially, it's basically a graphic design tool for non-designers. And that enabled us to quit our jobs and work on it full time. And then I've always been, pretty into investing and stuff like that. So, I was dabbling in, investing in individual stocks and stuff like that. And then as the business started to get more successful, I started to get more and more into investing, because I had a bit more, capital to deploy. And that's when I, came across Bitcoin. And the more I learned about Bitcoin, I just started to get more and more hooked, like a lot of people in the space. And there was just kind of like a light bulb moment when everything, really started clicking. And I started, upping, my personal allocation towards Bitcoin. And then after, COVID hit in March of 2020, our business was, sitting on a good amount of cash that we were, kind of saving. We didn't exactly know what we were going to do with it, whether we're going to, reinvest, more of that into the business, whether we want to just keep it as cash. And similar to Michael Saylor, we kind of viewed that cash as a liability at that point. And so we decided to, put 50% of our cash balance into Bitcoin, which was pretty fortunate timing because, you know, Bitcoin was like under 10K at the time. And then, you know, since then, I've just been continuing to learn more about Bitcoin, continuing to, you know, get involved in the space. And then, you know, that led us to launch Bitbo as a side project. And, you know, now we're kind of working on that as well. So that's the, the short version.
I love it. So many kind of connections to, you know, my entrance into this space. Personally, for me, it was like personal finance. Getting into like the 4-hour work week was very influential on me as well, and Tim Ferriss. But what y'all have done way beyond me is like actually build these different revenue streams and actually be entrepreneurial. So it's really amazing both to kind of see like one, building an internet business like Snappa, letting that free yourself, and then integrating Bitcoin, and then, you know, having that potentially give your business a lot more security kind of in this crazy time. And then even like, you know, leveraging the Bitcoin even more with a product. And, you know, I'm a big Bitbo fan. It's my main dashboard at this point, just because you guys deliver, you know, pretty much everything you need to see about Bitcoin on one page. I'm also a big fan of that Bitcoin magazine newsfeed in there. So y'all are doing a great job. But I guess let's talk a little bit about Bitbo a little bit more. You know, I think what you released it a little bit over a year ago. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think we launched the first one in November. So not quite
Less
a year
than a
yet,
year.
but
Okay.
yeah.
Seems like forever. So I guess let's talk about the dashboard. Like, what was the like the impetus behind the dashboard, and where do you see it going?
Yeah, so what we found was one of probably the best dashboard at the time was Clark's dashboard. So shout out to Clark Moody. And then so there's kind of like, if you wanted to see live stats, there was like one place to view it. And then if you wanted to see historical stats, and then we found that the data was like really kind of scattered among so many different websites. And so the goal with Bitbo, which obviously we're not quite there yet, was to basically have that one page dashboard where you can really see everything, including a price chart, because at the end of the day, a lot of people do gravitate to that number go up technology, and they want to see the price chart. But on top of that, in addition to seeing all the live stuff, having historical charts as well. So what we're working on now is basically what we want to do is take what Bitbo is right now, that one pager, and start adding historical data and charts to each one of the stats that we're tracking. So for example, you know, like hash rate and difficulty, really important. So being able to see, okay, how is the hash rate trending over time? Are we, you know, is it going in the right direction? Obviously, there was that, like, you know, China hashing exodus. So, you know, if you came to Bitbo, you would see, you know, what the hash rate is right now, but there wasn't a lot of context for, you know, where was the hash rate at 30 days ago versus today. So that's essentially the near term goal with Bitbo, is to get all the data that we're currently aggregating on the live dashboard, and adding some historical context on top of that. So, you know, you don't need to jump between like 3 or 4 different websites to get a grasp of, you know, exactly what's going on with the Bitcoin ecosystem. And what's super interesting for us is, like, you know, people are obviously building out on the Lightning Network, and now there's kind of layer 3 stuff being built on top of it. So I can't even imagine what kind of you know, things are going to be built over the next 5 to 10 years, and what kind of data and information we'll be able to surface based on that.
Yeah, I mean, again, you just keep on adding. I know one of the most useful areas is looking at the exchange traded funds and then the price and premiums of those funds. I know for a while you were listing GBTC there. Obviously, that's one of the most important kind of products. And then I guess that's more on the closed-end funds. I'm sorry, but you know, that had to be removed and then got added back on. Can you kind of talk to us about like what was the deal there when you had to remove GBTC from the dashboard, and like, you know, maybe even dive into like what's up with GBTC? I know that they've had a negative premium for a long time. I'm curious if you know, you look into that at all.
Yeah. I don't know if that, I don't recall ever removing GBTC. That might have been another dashboard or another source, but
Maybe that was my bad.
yeah, no worries. Yeah, so GBTC is interesting because essentially, I'm by no means like a super expert on it, but obviously GBTC was trading at a premium beforehand, and so I think what was going on is people were using it as an arbitrage opportunity because the funding rates were pretty high. And then essentially, once the funding rates went negative after the Elon FUD and all that kind of stuff started happening, GBTC was then kind of trading at a discount, and I think that was kind of messing with a lot of people's arbitrage trades at the time. And so I don't know if this has anything to do with it too, but a lot of people are also speculating that ETFs in the US are coming on board. Obviously, ETFs are available in Canada. So I'm not sure if, investors in the US are actually allocating to some of those ETFs in Canada, which have lower fees. And on top of that, they're trading, right around NAV as a normal ETF would. So essentially, I think GBTC itself, the product is starting to become a bit less appealing now that there's more options. There's more custody solutions. There's ETFs in Canada. And so I think it's not surprising to see that trading at a discount now. I think obviously the days of GBTC trading at like a 20% premium, I think those days are long gone now.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best GBTC can do at this point is convert to an ETF and just get back to NAV. Because I mean, that's probably the only way it happens. But it is interesting. So I'm curious into diving into, the Bitcoin for you more holistically. Like, obviously you use it as a treasury asset for your business. But why is Bitcoin important to you? I know you're Canadian, and the Canadian money printer has been going burr to a pretty fantastic pace at this point. But I guess just talk about Bitcoin a little bit.
Yeah. So pre-COVID, I think, a lot of people were skeptical that governments would eventually start, balancing their budgets, and that central banks would start unwinding their balance sheets a little bit. And especially after the Fed tried to taper a little bit back in, I think it was like 2018 or 2019. Obviously that didn't really work out so well. And so I think even at that time, a lot of people were kind of speculating that essentially MMT or whatever kind of terminology you want to throw around that is essentially going to be the way that governments are going to fund themselves moving forward. And then when COVID happened, at least for me, I think at that point I realized that there's no way that the central banks are ever going to, wind their balance sheets, and governments are never going to go back to, surpluses and balancing budgets. And the consequence of that, obviously, is that the only way that they can fund themselves is through printing money. The other thing is, if you look at interest rates from 1980 to today, they never kind of get back to a previous high. And it's basically just like a straight line, down and to the right. And so, now that we're kind of reaching this end game, essentially, where the only thing left is to either print more money or to take interest rates into negative territory, which is already being done in Europe. There's not a lot of options available other than real estate, putting it in an index fund, which if you just look at the valuations, is crazy, or Bitcoin. And what I love about Bitcoin is all of the properties of being censorship resistant, being portable. I'm in the process right now of relocating from Canada to the US, and being able to just take take your Bitcoin with you, and not have to empty out a brokerage account and then open up another one and then transfer to another one. it really is, pretty amazing that you can really just take it with you. So that's kind of why I think Bitcoin is important. I don't see, again, I don't see, governments or central banks easing up on monetary and fiscal policy. And I think Bitcoin is one of the tools that we have available to kind of protect us against that.
The funny thing is that, when you said Bitcoin was like literally the only option, I was having a conversation with my mom this morning. I'm actually at my parents' house right now. And, they're pretty well invested into real estate in the state that they're in here in the US. And they're going to like buy another house. And I'm like, guys, like, it's like, stop buying houses. Like, I know buying houses is a great investment compared to like just holding cash, but like houses are a very crowded trade. Equities don't make any sense whatsoever in terms of their valuations, price to earnings, all that kind of stuff. Like there is literally only one thing that's cheap, and that's Bitcoin. If you look at the 200-day moving average on Bitcoin, like we're well under. So, I mean, everything else is expensive. Dollars are getting printed. You need to get out of dollars. You're overly exposed to real estate as it is. Like, it's time to like really allocate to Bitcoin, guys. Like, don't put that whole house into Bitcoin. Like, seriously, don't buy the house. And I'm still trying to convince them, but if you actually understand Bitcoin, then it really becomes the only option. Like, then everything else just looks so much less appealing. But if you don't understand Bitcoin, and Bitcoin's a scary internet money still, then you have to compromise at this point because dollars are bleeding and you just have to get out and get into something else.
Yeah, I think the only problem with Bitcoin is like, let's say like your parents, for example, if you're kind of living off of your nest egg and you need to, withdraw some funds or whatever, the volatility, I think, does scare the shit out of a lot of people. Whereas, if you have that long-term time horizon and you have some cash flow that's sustaining you, and Bitcoin at that point, like the risk is a lot lower. So I think fundamentally, if you look at Bitcoin 5 to 10 years from now, it's probably going to be more stable than it is now, but you're also giving up a lot of that upside, right? Because we're the ones crazy enough to embrace the volatility. But I mean, at the end of the day, you don't get 100, 200%, annual compounding growth rate without suffering a bit of volatility along the way. So for my parents, for example, I got them to allocate a percentage of their portfolio. And the funny thing is, as number has gone up, they keep asking me if they should put more in. So I think the important thing is just to, get a little bit, maybe, even if it's like 5% or something like that, and watch that grow over time.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I do feel like you're right that the best way to convince them is to just say, hey, put a small amount that does not matter whatsoever, and then have them come back to you like, damn, I should have bought more. So that's
Yeah.
probably the best way to convince them. But unfortunately, then they should have bought more and just listen to you all the way when you were really recommending like, hey, allocate to this thing.
For sure. Yeah. But yeah, I agree with you on the, yeah, sorry, I was just gonna say, I the house thing is a bit scary now too, with all these like eviction moratoriums, and of course you've got like property taxes and
is it even your own property?
Yeah. So again, if you just compare as a savings vehicle or as a store of value, I mean, you really can't compare the properties of Bitcoin to real estate.
All right, Bitcoiners, I want to tell you about our newest sponsor. This show is brought to you by Ledn.io. I have been super, super impressed with the guys over at Ledn. I've actually known the co-founders, Adam and Mauricio, for a very long time. I've had the pleasure to watch them build Ledn up from a tiny, tiny startup to now a super impressive institutional grade Bitcoin and crypto lender. Y'all, I'm so impressed with these guys. They are offering some of the best rates out there. I don't think anyone even comes close to touching them. You can get 6.1% APY on your first 2 Bitcoin that you deposit into leaden interest accounts, and you can get 8.5% US on USDC deposits. I mean, I know all the competitors, they're not even close. If you're going to put your crypto and your Bitcoin into an interest account, Ledin is by far the best. And on top of that, like I said, these guys are hardcore Bitcoiners and they know the products and the services that Bitcoiners want and appreciate. They come up with B2X. It allows you to put your Bitcoin in, they leverage it up, and you can, with one click of the mouse, get twice the exposure to Bitcoin. So if you're super bullish, Ledin has you covered with a super, super easy way to get leverage with B2X. And then on top of that, they know that Bitcoiners care about your reserves. They know that Bitcoiners don't like under reserved and not full reserved financial institutions. So they are pushing the frontier in transparency in the digital asset lending space. And they are the first digital asset lender to do a full proof of reserves and proof of attestation through a Mariano LLC, a public accounting firm. So the Ledin guys, they know what Bitcoiners like. They are legit. I encourage you guys to check them out. Do your own research and go to ledin.io. That is LEDN.io and learn more. Bitcoiners, I want to tell you guys about The Deep Dive. The Deep Dive is a new premium newsletter from the Bitcoin Magazine team in conjunction with my man, BTCization, Dylan LeClaire. Dylan is such a multifaceted and wide-ranging analyst. He does everything from on-chain analytics to macro analysis to hash rate and all that kind of good stuff. He does it all. He breaks down everything that's happening every single day with his daily dive. He's going to dive into what is happening in the market that day. So that way you don't have to pay attention to Twitter. You don't have to pay attention to anything else. You can just pay attention to the deep dive and he has you covered. And at the end of the week, guess what? You get a weekly recap. And at the end of the month, hey, we have a freaking report, a beautiful PDF breaking down all the activity of that entire month, what it means for Bitcoin, what you can expect moving forward. The Bitcoin market is going to moon. We are here to make sure that we maximize your stack. Go to members.bitcoinmagazine.com to sign up today. And if you use promo code BITS, you can get 1 month for free. So again, the deep dive, I've been checking it out every day and you should too. So let's talk about your move a little bit. Why are you leaving Canada? What's that process like? Has Bitcoin helped you in that process? I'm assuming you're probably trying to liquidate other assets. If you want to compare and contrast a little bit more, I guess hit me with what this move is like. And is there a brain drain coming out of Canada? Because you're not the first person I've heard of trying to get out.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because when we're at the Bitcoin conference, we went out for dinner one night, and there happened to be quite a lot of Canadians there, and all but one of them were actively in the process of moving or trying to get out. For me personally, one thing I've always really liked about the United States is that there's some kind of geo arbitrage, and there's different states have different things to offer, different mentalities, different people. Whereas Canada is pretty much, no matter where you go across Canada, it's pretty much all the same. I was really against these forced lockdowns. I really didn't think that it was a good idea. And from what I saw with Canada, I saw that it was going to get, there's going to be more lockdowns. It seems to be getting more authoritarian. The taxes are really high in Canada, and I don't feel like we're really getting the adequate services for those taxes as well. And fundamentally, I just didn't agree with the direction that Canada is going in. And then if we look at the states, if you look at Texas and Florida, it's, very different from, what's happening in states like New York and California. So I felt like there was more optionality in terms of, being able to go to, different places that are more aligned with kind of my thinking. And then, weather is actually a big one too. I've been coming to Florida for the past few winters. And I'm definitely not a winter person. So for all those reasons as well, there's there's definitely seems to be more opportunity in the States as well. It's a bit more entrepreneurial. So I mean, in a nutshell, it really just aligns better with my philosophy and kind of where I want to lay down some roots. And so for all those reasons, I'm kind of in the process of moving here.
Awesome. Well, I mean, hey, I think a lot of people prior to 2020, saw the US and other Western countries on like a similar spectrum. And then 2020 showed why the US is actually different. And in my opinion, it's not voting that makes the US special. It's actually states' rights. The fact that these states have the ability to meaningfully differentiate themselves from a jurisdictional perspective. And then on top of that, the people living in the country can take their property and then they can move with their property without changing their phone number, without changing their brokerage account, without changing their bank account. They can do all of that. They can have a meaningfully different jurisdiction, and then they don't have to ask permission to do any of that for the most part, whereas like if you want to leave Canada, you have to do a lot to actually make that happen. And that's where I think Bitcoin changes the world, because Bitcoin brings that kind of like state to state arbitrage in the US, and it brings it everywhere. Because if you have your value in Bitcoin and you can kind of start negotiating and finding the best jurisdiction, you can bring your value with you without, bleeding too much of it, without losing too much of it, without having to, sell everything and then reestablish yourself somewhere else. It really is like that impactful of a technology. And I think, jurisdictional arbitrage, like that's what this is all about.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And again, like that's why I love the States, is that moving countries is a huge pain in the ass. It hasn't been easy or smooth. And so so like if I ever had to move again, I'd rather it be from one state to another rather than one country for another. But yeah, it's interesting too, because I first got into Bitcoin in like 2017, and it was buying Bitcoin on Coinbase or whatever. But it wasn't until I started, like actually taking self-custody, running my own node, actually sending transactions. I feel like that's when you really start to see the power of it. It's just, it's just going to be really interesting to see how things evolve over the next 10, 20 years when a bunch of people have their wealth in a bunch of, multi-sig vaults, and what that's going to do.
And I have high hopes. I'm a big sovereign individual fan. I've read it multiple times, showed it many times. And I think that thesis is about hyper Bitcoinization and people putting their value into multi-sig vaults and really getting a lot more expensive to kind of tax and keep down. But part of that book too is, governments are going to fight. Right? Governments are going to try to stay relevant. They're going to try to hold on to their seniorage. They're going to try to hold on to their tax base, all this kind of stuff. Like, what are your predictions for Canada? Like, do you have hope for Canada, or is Canada kind of like too far gone down this kind of like fiat process?
The thing that worries me about Canada is that there's a lot of people that are kind of advocating for what is happening. And, it's like, there's something like anytime there's something wrong, it seems to be like and I don't want to stereotype here. There are some like really great Canadians. There's some awesome entrepreneurs in Canada. But I'm just saying in general, it seems that if there's a problem, so for example, like right now, the housing is just completely unaffordable in Canada for most people. And so they want government to take more of a role to regulate, right? The healthcare system and so the healthcare system pre-COVID was already like essentially crumbling. And it was COVID, basically has exposed the system. Nurses are working in like pretty terrible work environments and aren't getting paid that much. And so again, everyone's answer is, well, the government needs to do more stuff. And so the answer always seems to be like, the government needs to take more of an active role. They want they're talking about federalizing childcare and all this kind of stuff. So the short answer is, I think it's only going to get worse, just because I think the average population there just wants more and more government control, and they want government to handle more and more stuff. And I used to work in the government, believe it or not. And so being on the inside, like, I've seen just how inefficient the majority of it is. And so I don't really see a scenario where having more government control, vaccine passports, and it is going to help that situation. I see it only getting worse. So that's one of the many reasons why I've chosen now is probably a time to get out.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, I look at Canada, I look at the UK, I look at Australia, I pretty much look at all the Commonwealth countries, and they're all doing the same thing. And, this cognitive dissonance that the most expensive, most fucked up markets are the ones where government is the most involved in is absolutely insane. It's like every single area where the government has their hands in is ballooning in terms of price, crashing in terms of quality. And everyone thinks that we need more government intervention, even in the US. Like, this idea that the government can't fix these things. This is a market issue that needs to be solved by the market. Like, that is stuck on people's head. And like, even healthcare in America is absolutely fucked up. It's one of the most regulated industries whatsoever. My brother is training to be a doctor and is going through just absolute hell. The way that they treat young doctors, residents in the medical industry in America is frankly disgusting, right? But it's all kind of built off of like this existing system, right? Where you need slave labor just to make your system work. That's how fucked up the medical system is in the US, that you need literally residents working 6 days straight for 12 hours straight, being on call every single night of that. And then on top of it, getting paid dirt shit. So that's the only way the medical system works. They rely on residents so heavily in order to work in the US, and it's pretty much slave labor. Like, in law, residents are not entitled to fair compensation. Like, they're not entitled to being a normal employee that has the same kind of human rights protections that a normal employee gets. So that's just one example. I mean, that's just one example, right? So everywhere you see the government heavily involved, it destroys market incentives. It destroys fair pay. It just, like, teachers. You're talking about nurses in Canada. Like, the more the government is, the more fucked up it is, people. Like, come on, wake up.
I mean, this isn't just in Canada either, but one of the things that like really bothered me, and I was incredibly lucky that my business was online, so I wasn't, super affected by it. But as an entrepreneur, it like really bothered me where, they were just deeming certain businesses, quote unquote, non-essential. Meanwhile, I would be in like Costco or Walmart, and the business is like freaking packed, right? And everyone can buy anything, but then the little these small mom and pop stores that have like super small capacities that could have easily been open, they had to close down because they're deemed not essential. And then we also had the CERB program where the government was handing out $2,000 a month checks to people. And so this is kind of similar in the States too, where what do you know, no one wants to go back to work anymore because they much rather be at home collecting money than having to go to work. And so I think people just people don't underestimate that when you mess with the free market, you're going to create distortions. And it's unfortunate because like I totally get it. Like when you're working, like minimum wage or at close to minimum wage, and all of a sudden you're getting a $2,000 check, it seems amazing. The problem though is that creates more problems further down the line. And I think that's kind of what you're seeing in Canada and a lot of these other places where, how that like no one can afford houses anymore because they brought the interest rate so low, they flooded the system with so much money. And so, everyone got to sit at home and collect $2,000 checks during the pandemic. But now that they're attempting to open things up, everything is way more expensive. They can't afford anything. So it was just a band-aid solution.
All right, let's take a quick break from that episode. I want to tell you guys about our sponsor. It is Bitcoin 2022 conference. I am sure you saw the videos. You may have been there in person. Bitcoin 2021 was an absolute smashing success. It was the biggest conference in Bitcoin history, crypto history, whatever history of the digital asset sphere. Bitcoin is number one, and the Bitcoin 2021 conference is number one with a bullet. It was an absolutely incredible time. I was working my ass off the whole time, but I got to meet so many incredible community members. And I think the best testament to how amazing Bitcoin 2021 was not just all of the amazing, accolades and compliments that I got personally and our team got, but also it's the skin in the game in Bitcoin 2022. We have already sold close to 1,500 tickets. That is more than 10% of the people, everyone who went to Bitcoin 2021 have already purchased tickets to Bitcoin 2022. We have not released a date. We have not released a city. We have not released anything. That is the biggest compliment. That is the biggest skin in the game of the community being down for this conference. Bitcoin 2022 is going to be bigger than Bitcoin 2021. It's going to be better than Bitcoin 21 in every single way. And we are going to be bringing you the best opportunity to mingle with the biggest, the baddest, the most Bitcoin people on the planet. So join the revolution. Go to b.tc/conference. Get your tickets today. I don't know what the ticket prices are. They are going up. I think they're $249 right now. We just rolled out Fiat ticket purchases. All the tickets purchased before today were all purchased in BTC. So get it, guys. Get it. Get this ticket. Be at Bitcoin 2022. See you there. Before we get back to the episode, I want to tell you guys about Bitcoin Magazine. Bitcoin Magazine is the oldest publication covering Bitcoin, and we've been covering Bitcoin since 2012. Y'all, I'm so proud to be working for Bitcoin Magazine. We spend all day trying to scour the internet for the top news, the top plebs, the top subjects, conversations, everything that has to do with BTC, the asset, BTC, the culture, BTC, the revolution. We are here for it. We are here for BTC and BTC only, and we want to give back to the Bitcoin community. Hit us up if you want to contribute, and go follow us on Twitter. Go subscribe to this podcast. Go follow us on YouTube. All of the places that you can find Bitcoin Magazine, we are there. Instagram, Reddit, everywhere. We're there. We're there. Follow us for the best Bitcoin knowledge. Back to the episode. Absolutely. Like, again, it not only was a band-aid solution, it actually just made everything worse, right? So they shut down these small businesses, and then on the flip side, they effectively, put the workforce on the financial opium. Here's your pill, here's your weekly pill. You don't need to work anymore. Like, we're just gonna give you all those good feelings anyway. And then on the flip side of that, it's just a really fucking bad come down, right?
Yeah.
Everything is distorted. And it was weird. I went to sushi last night, restaurant packed, absolutely packed. Help wanted sign on the door, 2 people working. It's just insane. Like, it's like, how is this happening, right? Like, how is it that this restaurant that's packed on a Tuesday can't get employees? And it just it blows my mind. And again, people are going to say, oh, the market's fucked up. We need more regulation to get this thing sound. And I firmly believe, like, it's going to take brain drain. It's going to take civilization crumbling, and it's going to take just utter frustration for anyone to just change their mind. And thankfully, there's Bitcoin. You can just opt out. You can do your little thing, just stacking sats and kind of isolate yourself. And I think, looking back at 2020, the most secure, happy people that I knew were Bitcoiners. Everyone else was a freaking nervous mess. Like, I can't imagine going through that. Can you imagine being in like freaking Ontario locked down and not having Bitcoin?
Yeah, I mean, well, I have a lot of friends and family that are still there, and it was a lot of them were pretty, disgruntled, and it the worst thing is like I don't think that's the end of it, because they just started lifting some restrictions in Ontario, and now they're already talking about the fourth wave that's probably going to happen in the winter, because obviously COVID seems to be pretty seasonal, and I think a lot of it depends on airflow, whatnot. So in the winter, I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that there's going to be an uptick in COVID cases and whatever, and so I think the writing's on the wall. There's going to be some sort of lockdown, or God forbid, vaccine passport type stuff going on as well. So yeah, I definitely agree. Like the people that are kind of getting through this the best are the Bitcoiners and the sovereign individuals, essentially. And I think the government is really creating like a two-tiered class system where those that are wealthy enough to kind of dodge these regulations, and all their assets are getting pumped up, they're loving it. And I feel for the people at the bottom that I can't even imagine being like a young 20s kid coming out of university with student debt. You can't afford a house. The jobs and the wages just aren't there. Like, it's no reason why you're seeing stuff like suicide rates are up and whatever, because they probably just don't know how they can get ahead, right? And I think Bitcoin is probably one of the few things that could actually help them get ahead, which is why we need to keep spreading the message.
Yeah, I mean, again, like it is a grim future for those who do not have Bitcoin. I guess, like, how do you get people over that? Like, in my mind, Bitcoin is literally a new mental operating system for your head, right? Like, most people right now, they're on the fiat operating system still mentally. And that's why, like, when you see these people like who are vaccinated and frustrated that they're going to be locked down again and lashing out at the perceived enemy, like, they're doing what is logical in the fiat system, in the fiat minded sense, right? It's almost illogical to behave that way. You're like, I did everything I deserve. I wanted to. I listened to the state. I listened to science, blah, 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 and I'm still getting fucked. And then on the flip side, if you're on the Bitcoin mindset, you realize that, all those things are lies. Like, reality is that markets and freedom are the best way to organize people. And it's like, it's a very, very difficult time to bridge over and like change that mindset. Like, what other than getting people kind of skin in the game? Hey, mom, allocate, just a small amount where you don't notice or whatever. Like, how are you kind of like talking to people about like Bitcoin and actually, like, let's say orange pilling them, like getting them over kind of that hump into like, oh wow, like I need to start questioning what I've previously believed?
Yeah, that's a tough question, because the sad reality is the majority of people want security and safety. They kind of just want to follow orders type of thing. I just found in general, like even before Bitcoin, the people that were always the most successful are the people that like actually question things. They're kind of going against the rules a little bit, because a lot of rules are frankly just bullshit, right? And so I think like a lot of the people that gravitate towards Bitcoin already kind of have some amount of like healthy skepticism with government and just the way that the world functions, so to speak. And they have that kind of entrepreneurial nature. What doesn't necessarily mean that like they're starting businesses or whatever, but they just have that free thinking kind of spirit. So I kind of I tend to somewhat let them come to me, or if they say something that like, hey, like that this particular thing like doesn't make sense, and they almost like give me an opening, then I'll kind of meet them there and try to cater the pitch to where they're coming from. Whereas like I find like if you just, go up to, friends or random people and you just start like shilling Bitcoin, that strategy tends to not work out well, because it's almost like they get dismissive, and they almost like, I find a lot of people can get pretty like salty and bitter about it too, because like, they weren't in on it yet, and everyone always thinks that it's too late for Bitcoin as well. Um, so I just try to meet them where they're at. If I see an opening, I kind of try to, tailor the pitch to that. But what I found is, the people that are kind of more open to it, or kind of asking me questions, tend to be, much more easier to orange pill than the people that are just kind of like running through the motions, and just, trying to do as they're told, kind of thing. Because it's almost like they're admitting that, what they've been doing was kind of stupid and hasn't been working. And it's almost like they don't want to admit that Bitcoin is what it is. They want to just believe it's a scam, or it's a Ponzi, and they get frustrated that people are actually becoming wealthy off of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, hey, this conversation is inspiring a lot of thoughts for me. But I mean, the reality is that like a lot of, let's just call it, more liberal-minded people trusting the state as part of their political identity, and
Yeah.
then like that just makes it really hard for them to get Bitcoin, and has nothing to do with their intelligence. I think Croesus BTC did a really great article about why the yuppie elite don't get Bitcoin, and it has nothing to do with intelligence. It has everything to do with kind of trust in the system, being a rule follower, that kind of thing. So it's going to be really interesting to kind of see how Bitcoin adoption plays out, because so many more, let's just call it, libertarian type entrepreneurial types like it, and that is a minority of the population, especially in Canada, especially in a lot of these like Commonwealth state or Commonwealth countries. So I'm very just kind of intrigued in like, what this adoption story is going to look like, right? And like, are Bitcoiners, despite just being people who want to own property, like, are they going to be called terrorists? Are they going to be called these like kind of negative things? Because again, like, these people, they're seeing their system fall apart, but they're committed to the system, and they're kind of seem blind to see the faults in the system from a systemic level. I think I said system like 6 times there, but passing it back to you.
Yeah, well, it almost reminds me of how they're labeling the unvaccinated people like, like a terrorist organization that is like ruining the world. And so I wonder if, like you said, it's almost going to be like the same thing with Bitcoiners, that they're somehow like ruining the system, and screwing everything up for the rest of us. And fundamentally, at the end of the day, I think like Bitcoiners tend to just be free market people, and this is what I think a lot of people don't understand, that just because we want to see a free market and we don't want a ton of government control, that doesn't mean that like we don't care about other people, and that we're selfish. It means that we truly believe that free markets are what actually uplifts everybody, um, and that we think that free markets will do a better job of allocating resources and making everyone better off. And so I think that's kind of what a lot of like liberal minded people don't understand, is that they think that more free market or right leaning people are just like selfish assholes, and we don't want to pay any taxes and stuff like that. It's like, no, like I'm from Canada, like the top tax rate is over 55%. And believe me, like I would much rather entrepreneurs allocate more money and start more businesses and hire more people than the government allocate, 55% of somebody else's money, because I don't think that they've historically done a good job. And I don't think that they're doing a good job now. And I would rather the free market allocate the majority of that money. So yeah, that's kind of how I feel about it. And hopefully in the future, we'll bring taxes to a more reasonable level that we're actually getting a good service, and let's let the free market, the entrepreneurs, the private industries, handle the rest of that.
So I think you make a really great point there. And just to like quantify that a little bit, right now, common knowledge is that it takes the government in the United States spending $3 for every dollar of growth. If you were an entrepreneur and you couldn't make a dollar of growth with less than a dollar, you'd be out of business. But here we are asking the government to take up to 60% of our income and then take that income and then get a 1 to 3 return on it. Right. So they're spending $3 for $1 growth in the US. I don't even know if it's that efficient in other states. I'm assuming probably worse. So like, come on, guys, just do the math. Your fellow Canadian, Greg Foss, do the math, do the math, guys. It's impossible. And, all of these fiats are, they're just going to systematically devalue because you run the numbers. It's impossible to get out of the debt at this point.
Yeah, I subscribe to the Jeff Booth thesis, and especially also, running a software company, is that I definitely think that we're just in this, like the state of technical deflation, exponential deflation from technology. And so I think what would happen is if you stopped now, like we couldn't do this right now because it would obviously like crash the whole system. But let's imagine a world where you would, stop printing money and you would let the free market dictate the interest rates. I think what you would see is that prices of everything would keep falling. But the other consequence of that is that you probably wouldn't see as many jobs. And this is essentially what governments are fighting against, is that technology is removing jobs and therefore they're printing money to bring those jobs back. But if you actually just let the technology do its thing, I think what would happen is instead of, a household with, 2 people working 40 hours a week, you probably have, one person working 40 hours, but everything in their life would be, half as, twice as cheap or half as expensive. And so even though they're working, half the amount of hours and making half as much money, well, everything is twice as cheap. And so that's essentially what, I believe would happen under a Bitcoin standard with technology increasing at an exponential rate, but where governments and central banks are essentially fighting against that. And so I think that's where you're seeing this, like, $3 of government spending for $1 of growth, because it's just impossible at this point.
Again, yeah, I mean, it's impossible. They're fighting against technology. Every central bank's mandate, it has a jobs mandate, right?
Yep.
Guess who invented jobs mandate? Communists. That was part of the Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto, is a job mandate, full employment. I'm sorry to break it to you guys, but technology is anti-labor, right?
Yep.
Technology is pro-efficiency. So like, I just try to think to myself, like, this laptop I have in front of me, like, let's go backwards 30 years. How many people would have taken to make, 3 to 5 podcasts a week, to publish 30 to 40 articles a week? Like, I'm pretty much a one-man machine, like, making this thing happen. And it's because I have this like massive, like, technological beast of an assistant that can, make this stuff possible. And, how many jobs were destroyed in that? Like, countless jobs, and then on an exponential level. And then here we have a central entity that's trying to manipulate the economy to ensure that maximum people have jobs. Like, no wonder it's fucked up. Like, we're not even getting the benefit of the technological innovation because we have a government trying to kill it, right? And again,
that's the
like,
crazy thing. Is like,
go for it.
Or sorry, I was just gonna say, it's like, we don't even know how amazing the world could be if we actually just let technology do its thing and let the free market adjust, right? And because right now, just everything is just completely distorted, everything is misallocated. That's why you're seeing so much, in my opinion, a lot of the social unrest is because, obviously the wealth gap and inequality is it's only getting bigger. I think the transition period, unfortunately, is going to be pretty messy. I'm hoping to be proven wrong on that. But my hope is that on the other side of it, if we actually let things play out as they should, hopefully there's some renaissance on the other side of that. And, people are doing things that they love instead of doing, shitty jobs that they're kind of forced into just to get a paycheck. So to keep the system going.
Yeah, I mean, again, fiat is dying. It's going to be a disgusting and brutal process of that death, but Bitcoin's here to alleviate it a little bit, especially for those who adopt early. So, I mean, Bitcoin's a life raft here, guys. The fiat system is dying by itself. Coronavirus didn't kill it. The Fed was doing emergency QE and repo facilities far before the crisis, and it's been dying. Things have been fucked up. I was talking to Zuby, hardcore libertarian, not so much convinced into Bitcoin, doesn't think about how Bitcoin can practically help the average day person take back their sovereignty. And he's saying, I just want to go back to 2019 when things were normal. And I was like, bro, this is how fucked up 2021 is, because 2019 was fucked up. 2019 was already clown world. And that's just how bad it's gotten now. Like, we shouldn't want to go back to that. Again, just to reference someone else, Aaron Segal, who's a Bitcoin magazine advisor and a fantastic economist and writer, in a podcast he did with me and Jeff Booth, he was saying, like, we don't know how good we could have been. Like, there's nothing more insidious than 2% inflation, because, like, okay, it's 2% inflation this year, but we have no idea where technology could have been if it wasn't dealing with that, for the past 50 years, right? On August 15th, that's going to be the 50-year anniversary of the fiat dollar. We've been dealing with this system for 50 years. So, like, what's the compounding distortion of, whatever percent inflation over the past 50 years because of fiat money? Like, it's more than we can imagine. It's much more than 2%. That's for sure.
Yeah. I agree with you there.
Chris, great having you on the pod. Great ripping about just Bitcoin, about, how society, needs to kind of realign. I guess want to give you a moment to just give a last word to the Bitcoin Magazine audience. The floor is yours.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on the pod. If you guys want to, see a good look at what's going on in the Bitcoin ecosystem, check out bitbo.io. And we've integrated the Bitcoin Magazine feed as well. So you can see all the new articles that the awesome guys and gals over there are producing. So yeah, just check that out. And if anyone wants to follow me on Twitter, my handle is Gimmer.
Awesome, guys. And hey, check out Snappa too. I learned about it recently, and it looks like a really freaking awesome product. So, if you're not a graphic designer and you want to make some nifty, little graphics for your podcast, for Instagram, for Twitter, all that kind of good stuff, it looks like a really cool product. And y'all are using Bitcoin as your treasury asset, which means that, hey, your dollar to Snappa is going into Bitcoin at some point. So Bitcoiners, if you need a solution like that, check out Snappa. But until then, check me out at CK_Snarks on Twitter. Check out Bitcoin Magazine at bitcoinmagazine.com, at Bitcoin Magazine on Twitter, and over at bitbo.io, where you can get all of your Bitcoin fundamentals as well as our news feed. Chris, thanks again to all the Bitcoiners. Catch you later.
Thanks a lot. That was fun.
Yep.